Hello there, dear listener. It's me, your incorrigible host of the Microsoft Mega Byte podcast, Brian Gavados, and today I'm coming at you with a very special interview with someone who has a big impact on anyone who sells or represents Microsoft products in store. So, for this episode, for the week of June 8th, 2020, I'm going to be talking with Brian Lee. He is the guy behind so many of the decisions and developmental processes of RDX, that retail demo experience that is running on all of the Windows screens that you see in your computing department. That attract loop, those videos, those prompts, those tutorials that guide a customer through. Well, what's the story with RDX? How has it evolved? Where is it going? What are we going to be expecting as the next versions of it roll out? Well, that's why I thought it was so important to talk to Brian and get his perspective on behind the scenes of the retail demo experience. So throughout this conversation, we're going to be saying RDX all the time. So just know that when we talk about RDX, we're talking about that demo experience on the device. And we're also going to be using RSP over and over again. And all that means is retail sales professional. Anyone who works in store and helps sell to customers, we call an RSP or an RP. So just want to be sure we're clear on the terms and the tech. And you know what? Enough of my bibble babble. Let's jump in and talk to Brian Lee. All right, and here we are with the famous Brian Lee. And I say famous because I think for the past, a better part of a decade, you have been, Brian, a big staple in my life. You've had a big impact on what the training team does, on what RSPs do in the field, because you, among all of your responsibilities, are the man to go to with any questions about RDX. RDX, that retail demo experience. So, Brian, we would love to get to know you because of that impact you have on all of us who work in the field. So, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a bit about your background. Who are you? How long have you been with Microsoft? And specifically, how long have you been working on, all things RDX?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Happy to be here as well. I am right now celebrating this week my 20th year at Microsoft, so big milestone for me.
Okay, so I didn't want to age either of us, but actually I was going to say you've been a staple for an entire decade because I've been around for about 10 years. So yes, wow, 20 years. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been a long time at Microsoft. I've have been very fortunate to have a great career at Microsoft. One of the things I'm most proud about is the various roles that I've had. I started in our supply chain and manufacturing group. I then cascaded over and started doing field labor and field merchandising, did channel management, did category management, did product management, and now I'm in, for the past 5 years, into demo and in-store experiences for Microsoft's consumer-based products.
Yeah, so I imagine even within those 5 years, there's probably been, anyone working in the field can certainly attest, there's been a lot of substantial changes to that last 10 feet of customer engagement when that demo experience, whether it's retail pro guided or whether it's self-guided, there are big changes that have been happening over the years. So I'm curious from your perspective, what was that demo experience when you arrived, when you started working on it, and how has it evolved to where we are now in 2020?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved a lot. Even when I was in a different role working on the Windows business, RDX as we know it used to be installed via CD drive. For Flash to Windows 10 and the Windows 10 launch, the first time that we had a demo solution that was fully integrated, built into the OS, that was a major step. Just to have a demo product that was pre-installed on every Windows 10 device was a huge accomplishment. To now we're starting to see some of the real evolution of RDX over the past year and a half, which is exciting to talk about today, some of the things that we're going.
I certainly remember installing it from CD and then installing it from different thumb drives and then the manually downloading the bits for RDX and bugging you nonstop, pestering you over the weekend for different files because, oh my gosh, something just dropped on Friday and we need it for Monday's demos. So yes, things have definitely changed and for the better. I imagine in your world, there are two big categories when you think about the retail pro engagement and the customer engagement, the management and the experience side. You've talked about the management side and how things have become more and more seamless and more fluid for that process. Are there any big changes that you've seen happen from the customer experience, the customer engagement side, to how a customer would have walked up and interacted with a Windows gosh, would have been Windows 10 5 years ago. Oh my gosh, how much time has passed? Yeah. Yes. How a customer would have engaged with a Windows PC 5 years ago versus what their experience would be now. Are there any fundamental changes in the approach?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of fundamental changes. A lot of it is grounded in consumer research that we do. It's grounded in the connectivity, telemetry that we get from devices and usage of devices. But really now it's about creating engaging customer experiences, both from a marketing content perspective, but also from just using Windows 10, using Office applications, trying to give more relevant to consumers with how they want to engage with the device. Do they just want better content and device information, front and center on the device, the very first thing they see? And that's what you're seeing with our digital fact tag that we rolled out last holiday is, bringing PC specs front and center to be more relevant for the customer.
Now, I'm sure that those variables must, vary from retail partner to retail partner, the kinds of things that should be shown first or the kind of content that should be prioritized or the kind of questions that ask them. Could you peel back the curtain a little bit? Because I'm sure a lot of our demoers in the field would love to know how those decisions get made and how you balance what content gets prioritized where and for how long.
Yeah, so certainly there is a lot of work that's done behind the scenes, both with our retail partners, our content providers from the OEM, from chipset providers like Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. The thing that you'll see now is RDX is highly customized. So the version that we rolled out last holiday has a lot of customization options. And so you can walk into one particular retail partner and it looks like it's fully branded like that retail partner. You could walk into another retail partner and you can see that they've taken a different approach with how to use RDX to sell. One section will show you things about the PC and what the PC can do. Another section will show the attached products, whether it be Office, whether it be somebody's tech services, for example.
Right.
Or it's just general information about the chipset provider or about Windows gaming. There's a lot of customization work that we're now doing with our retail partners. So we're surfacing the right information that is most relevant for the customers while also making sure we're giving the core tenets around PC specs, around Windows, and around Office or Microsoft 365.
Okay, so as we talk about the recent developments, the most recent innovations that your team is working on for RDX, I know there's some exciting stuff going on right now, and some of it is beneficial, perhaps just almost serendipitously to this difficult time we're in, because customers are, of course, going to be engaging in store quite differently than they were used to the last time they were regularly in store, and same with our retail pros. So could you touch on, Brian, some of the latest changes that any retail pro or anyone demoing Microsoft in the field will be seeing from RDX in the near future?
So one of the things that we're excited about is the new RDX Virtual Sales Assistant. So this is our chatbot for Windows 10 RDX devices that's going to help consumers qualify their purchase on a Windows 10 device. So while you certainly can talk to our chatbot and ask it questions, hi, how are you, what is his name? It's really designed to ask questions that the consumer may have about the device. Whether it's PC specs, what the processor of the device is, what is a solid state hard drive, what is memory, how much memory does this device? It's really designed to ask questions about the device specs of that Windows 10 PC, but then also ask some general questions about the device. We're super excited about this application as a scenario for maybe a situation where you can't find an RSP in the store, and potentially we're looking at this as a solution in the future where we potentially could connect consumers to remote agents in a either text-based or video-based scenario.
Yeah, so if I'm a trainer or a demoer or a retail pro, an RSP listening to this, I'm actually putting myself in that mindset to think about what the benefits of what you're describing are. And what immediately comes to mind is when I'm dealing with a busy store, I'm stacked, 4 or 5 customers deep, and I'm waiting to get to them, and I'm struggling to balance my time. I can now expect that customer to be more informed by the time I get to them. They can have a richer set of questions because they've had that more tailored experience in RDX. I can spend more time selling them on the benefits that they've now been learning about rather than all the time explaining from ground zero what the device even is.
Yeah, so it's certainly possible for the RDX virtual sales assistant to be your helper, right? To help in an unassisted sales environment. So the chatbot by design, when you open it up, it's going to present you with 4 or 5 kind of pre-populated questions. In case the consumer doesn't really know what they should ask, like what's the device specs of this PC? What processor does this device have? What does the solid state hard drive mean? So there's some pre-populated questions to help with purchase intent. But then if the consumer just has a question, doesn't know the answer, or even if the RSP doesn't know an answer of what's Microsoft 365, then we've got the virtual sales assistant that's informed through Azure Bot Services and the work that we've done there to essentially help educate consumers in blue shirts and be that virtual sales assistant that we want it to be.
It's nice to hear that RDX is evolving in a way that many customers will be familiar with. And this is not something new that an RSP is going to need to teach a customer how to use a chatbot, for example. So I think this is going to be a natural, organic next step for what RDX represents in store.
It's a very intuitive conversation. We're going to have some really great marketing graphics that will help introduce the chatbot and launch the chatbot so you can easily find it within RDX. But it's very intuitive to use, and I think it's a really good tool to get additional information when you can't find an RSP. Also great that it's built on Microsoft tech, so it's all built in Azure Bot Services. So it's a great Microsoft story as well.
Now, in this new shopping era that we're entering into, there's so many unknowns about how long distance engagements will be the norm and what next year will look like. So how are we handling that social distancing aspect of shopping in the near future?
Yes, we definitely know that the shopping experience is going to change as retail stores open up. There's a lot of work that we're doing, both short-term and long-term, to assist in the scenario where customers are hesitant to touch the device. Some of this is leveraging new functionality that we have available today in RDX. A good example of that is, as everybody knows, when a device is not being engaged by a customer, we play in a track loop. And the track loop comes from the OEM, it could come from the chipset manufacturer, it could be a promotional-based track loop that we put in. There's a lot of things we do behind the scenes with the track loops. But how do we use that track loop better to where a customer may not want to actually engage with the device? And so some of the things that we're looking for is essentially what we call, kind of technical speak, HTML overlay graphics. And that's the ability where we can put a simple graphic on top of an track loop. It's not embedded in the video in any way. But maybe it gives you the top 3 key PC specs of the device. Maybe it gives you ratings and reviews for that without ever touching the device. You don't even need to know or look at a fact tag. You can look right on that graphic that's playing right on top of the track loop. The track loop is still playing, and you can see that information.
So is this aware of passersby, or is this part of that timed track loop?
It's part of the timed track loop. It's not embedded on it. It essentially sits kind of on top of it.
Right.
And it's kind of always present. So if you break the track loop, it certainly would go away and you'd get our standard RDX experience. But if you didn't want to engage with the device and you wanted to see the digital fact tag as an example, it's going to be right there in that graphic. You could have 3 or 4 specs that could be there. We're also looking at ways of potentially putting a QR code on top of an track loop that potentially goes to the product detail page for that device. And so now on your mobile phone, you would have that product detail page that you could then go surf additional information about that, learn about key specs, pricing, inventory that the retailer may be posting on their .com site.
So it's really a new and perhaps more readily accessible 10-foot experience you're talking about. Yeah. So that's a big deal. That's a big change. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's looking at new ways, like knowing that we're going into a new retail store environment where customers are just maybe hesitant to touch the devices. Is can we present information on top of an track loop that gives them answer some of the questions that they need, can points them easily to the product detail page for that retailer that they're in. We're looking at other ways of potentially having a QR code, and maybe the chatbot that we just talked about shows up on your mobile phone. Then instead of using the PC to engage in that chatbot, maybe you're using your mobile phone. and it's the same experience. So maybe long term, we're even looking at a scenario where your mobile device, becomes your remote control for the RDX device that you're shopping. So, do you use your phone to navigate through the various tile sections and content that's right there in front of you?
Wow.
Without touching the device, without using the keyboard or the mouse, you have a way with your mobile phone, a device that you're feeling comfortable with and you feel that you can use to engage and have a customer shopping experience.
We are talking to a bunch of people who influence sales, who work with RDX day in and day out, who have various attract loops totally memorized in their brains from seeing them all day. When considering that audience, how does feedback work for your team hearing about the realities of RDX in the field? And also, as we sign off here in a minute, what should the field team expect in terms of being prepared for the changes that are coming from RDX?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for their support of RDX over the years. We certainly have gotten a lot of good and bad feedback about things that we've done right, things that we've done not so right, and certainly the challenges along the way. I think the biggest thing for me is I love to get the feedback through the appropriate channels. We do take that into consideration, and you do see a lot of the changes in content, a lot of the changes in technology and engineering improvements. Certainly things like network bandwidth with devices was probably one of the bigger pain points, and we made a ton of changes so devices don't consume that type of content and help network infrastructures. So certainly those types of scenarios are very important, or the feedback and the suggestions that we get from all of our partners, including RSPs, is very important to to where RDX evolves as a customer shopping experience. I think from a coming soon perspective, outside of a lot of the great improvements around content, some of the new experience that are coming, you're going to also see some additional training resources come to light in terms of documentations of how to use RDX, how best to use RDX, and a lot on the content side of things from training in terms of where to find a lot of this great content that we're developing from partners. The big change is RDX is going to look a little bit different across every partners, and how do we educate everyone to know where they find that based on what we deploy.
Good grief. Brian Lee, a man whose Outlook calendar availability could be described at best as nightmarish. I'm so glad that you carved out the time to drop by our pokey little podcast and talk to the field team. So this is probably the most brass tacks episode we've done about tools that they actually use. This has been very, very practical and very, very helpful, and I can't wait to send this out to the field and hear what they think of this conversation. So thanks again, Brian Lee. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This has been the Microsoft Mega Byte podcast, a training tool for Microsoft field team members and sales professionals across the country, produced by Microsoft employees.